Hi, this is Camp K9. I'm Tony Twist and welcome to my preschool puppy training. Today in this session we are going to look at ways of understanding training a little bit better in a little bit more detail, the methods of training, how dogs learn, how we teach, and also some golden rules and some tips on how to train. So let's look at the 4 golden rules to begin with. We have always remain consistent. If you're not consistent, your puppy is never going to understand whether he's coming or going. The second one, reinforce, reward, behavior that you want to have repeated. You've got to have an incentive for them to repeat and repeat and repeat something, and you need to reward that. You need to reinforce that. There needs to be a reason for them to do it again and again and again. Eventually, they're going to do this without any reward. But when you're actually training and you're trying to incentivize them to remember what they did a minute ago and to repeat it again, that's why you need to reinforce or reward the behavior that they're doing. Ignore behavior that you don't want. In case you accidentally reinforce something that you don't want to reinforce, then it's best to ignore behavior that you don't want. Behavior that is ignored if there's no reinforcement, that if they're jumping and jumping and jumping up and they're doing it for attention and you stop giving them attention for that, then the reinforcer has disappeared, then the behavior will disappear as well. If you can't ignore it, if they are jumping up and pulling on your clothes or tugging on your socks or something like that, if you can't ignore it, then interrupt the behavior. Get them to do something that you can reward them for. For example, okay, they're tugging on something or chewing something and they shouldn't, but they shouldn't be doing that. So you want to distract them in some sort of way. You would then want something. You then want to ask them to do something, whether that's a sit or a wait or something, just anything. It doesn't really matter, but get them to do something that you can then reward them for, and that way you've distracted them from what they're doing. What you don't want to do is to bring in something like a tasty chew or a toy or something like that straight into the scenario of them chewing on something, because that becomes a reward. So it's best to interrupt, get them to do something, reward them for that, and having distracted them from whatever they're doing, get on with the rest of the day or hour or minutes or whatever it is that you're struggling with at that precise moment in time. Okay, so let's talk about how you train a new behavior and the words to help you understand. So let's look at luring to begin with. So to lure, let's pick a really simple one like sit. If you want your puppy to sit, you get a piece of food, and we're talking about positive reinforcement training here. So we're not talking about hands-on trying to force and shape your dog. We're asking the dog to make the shape on their own. So where is it, rather than sort of putting your hand on their bottom and pushing it down to the floor to get them to sit, what you would do is you would get a treat in your hand and you would put it under their nose, and then you would lift it up like this, and as they looked up at the treat, their bottom would go down on the floor. As soon as their bottom's down on the floor, you've lured them into that position. So when we say lure into a shape, we mean use a piece of food and lure them into the shape of having the bottom on the floor and the head looking towards you, and that's a sit. So that would be then the behavior that you want them to do. The behavior for a sit would be for them to put their bottom on the floor. So you lure them into the shape which creates the behavior, and then you reward by letting them have that piece of food. Now, having done that over and over and over and over again, repeat, you will see a little light bulb go on in your puppy's brain. And as you go to do it, they go, oh, I know this one. And they put their bottom down on the floor. Bang, great, brilliant. You've got it. You're ready for the next stage. So what you want to do is you want to add your marker. And when we talk about a marker, we're talking about a word that tells them spot on the split second that they've done what they've done, that's what you're looking for them to do. So that's what gets them the reward. So, for example, in a sit, you lure them, they put their bottom down on the floor, and the split second that bottom touches the floor, you go, good, and then you give them their reward. So now you've got the lure, followed by the behavior, followed by the mark, followed by the reward. Lure, behavior, bottom sits down, mark, good, right as the bottom hits the floor, and then follow with the treat, with the reward. Lure, behavior, mark, reward. Those are those steps. You repeat those again and again and again and again and again. You want to repeat these about 10 times, by which time you can look at the puppy and go, has he really got it? Has she really got it? Yes, she has. Wonderful. We're ready for the next stage. So let's look at stage 3. Now your puppy understands the shape that you want and the method of training with the marker and the reward following. You are now in a position to be able to introduce the cue. Verbal language is not a dog's first language. Dogs' languages first are body language, and then they learn the verbal language on top. So when you're doing a sit, when you did your lure, you got the treat and you lured up like this. You lured up like this. So when you are giving the cue, you want a verbal cue. By the time you're moving on to the cue, hopefully you're not luring quite the same way, right close to the nose. Hopefully by this time you're able to just do this and the puppy is sitting. So your visual cue becomes this, the lifting up of the hand with the treat in it. That's your visual cue. And your verbal cue will be sit. So you go sit, the puppy puts its bottom on the floor, you mark good, and you give them the reward. So you've got the cues there, the visual and the verbal. Sit, bottom goes down, good, reward. Repeat, 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 repeat. Once you have got that, you want to start to fade the reward. So it might be that you are asking for a faster behavior. You want that bottom going down, bang, 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 every time you ask. And sometimes they're a bit slower doing it. And you think, well, that's good. I'll give you a good for that, but I'm not going to give you a treat reward for that. It wasn't worth it. So, and then and also as your puppy is growing up, as we're going through the weeks and into the months now, and your puppy is doing really well with its training, you will decide to fade the reward in certain different ways. And we'll talk about that in a little bit further on. Okay, right. So you've taught your basic puppy training. Now you're on to progressing. So how might we progress? The first way we might progress is to progress using the 3 Ds. Duration is the easiest, so we start with duration. I want you to hold that sit for the count of 3, the count of 5, the count of 10, 20, 30 seconds. So you work on duration. The second D is distance. You want them to sit from 2 feet away from you when you ask them to sit. You want them to sit 5 feet away from you when you ask them to sit. And then the hardest for all training is to be able to listen and to do what is asked for you under distraction. So that's the third D, distraction. And distraction can be noises, it can be visual distraction, it could be smells. It could be that there's a hot dog stand somewhere or other, or you're cooking dinner or something like that, or you've got food in a bowl, but you want him to sit somewhere over there whilst he waits for his food. So the 3 Ds, duration, distance, distraction, in that order. Okay, let's talk about another form of progressing your training, Generalization. Puppies are hopeless at generalizing. You train them how to do something perfectly in your kitchen, and then you're around someone's house, or maybe your friend comes round and you're in the lounge and you go, oh, 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 look what my puppy can do. My puppy can do this. Hey, hey, puppy, sit. And the puppy doesn't know what to do. And you think, but he knows this. And the puppy's going, sorry, can't. There's no oven in here. Where's the table? The sink, the fridge isn't buzzing. Puppies are absolutely useless at generalizing. You need to train them how to do something in one room, and then you need to take that into a different room and start from the basics again and work your way up, and then take them into another room and start from the basics and work your way up, and then maybe take them out onto the patio, or maybe take them into the garden, or maybe take them to another person's house and go through it again. Practice, 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 practice in all various different places, so that they can generalize and know that they don't need to have that oven in the right place and that fridge buzzing, or the boiler clicking on and off, or the sliding doors going, or whatever it is that they're used to doing when they're training in a particular room. And then fading the reward. When you're fading a reward, you're basically not going to reward on every single performance that they do of that particular behavior. But be warned, puppies and dogs can learn to count. So don't choose to always not reward on the third attempt, because the puppy will count and know that they're not going to get a reward on that third try, and they'll just go, I'm not doing it on this one because I know I'm not going to get anything for it. So do it on varied ratios, so that they don't get used to a pattern in any form, and reward for the best. You know what they're capable of. You know when they're not trying it quite as hard as you know they can do. So fade your rewards by using different things. Use a high reward if they go beyond what they've ever done before. Use a good reward if they are maintaining what they have learned already. And use a lesser reward if they are maybe a bit slow that day. Be aware that if you don't if you are unable to reward a puppy 3 times in a row for doing something that you've asked them to do, you are poisoning that cue. You are losing your puppy's interest in doing that particular activity. And this is why when we're training our puppies, we always work in tiny little puppy steps, to ensure that we're always setting them up to succeed. We just progress it a tiny weeny little bit at a time, so that they are able to accomplish what we're asking them to do. If we move forward too fast in too bigger steps, they're not going to be able to do that. And then once you've done that 2 or 3 times and they've been unable to do it, and you haven't been able to reward them for anything, they lose interest. So if you find that you are struggling with something, maybe it's because you've just been training that particular thing for too long in that particular session, and it's not going so well now. He's lost his focus or something like that. Then what you want to do is you want to just go back a few steps to something you know he can do, something you know is really easy for him, and then you can reward that and you can end on a high note. And that's what training should always do. Training should be fun. Everything you're doing, you should approach as a training game. You want to be excited about what you're doing to get your puppy's excitement and interest in it. And you want it to be fun for both of you. If it's not fun for either of you, it's not training, it's not going to plan, and no one's going to learn out of it. So always end on a high note. Okay, let's talk about how sometimes it can, how to always be careful that you are training in times that suit your puppy, so that you are setting them up to succeed rather than to fail. So training should always be fun, as we've already discussed, and you should always set them up to fail. You should always set them up to fail. That's a good way of training, isn't it? You should always set them up to succeed rather than fail in progressive small steps, keeping the training positive. Now, when might this not work? If your puppy is too hungry and you're working with food rewards, which we do when we're working with young puppies, their focus is going to be so much on that food that they aren't going to focus on what you're asking them to do. So don't try and train them when they are too hungry. Also, don't train them when they're too full. If you've just fed them their dinner, then they are going to be too full to really want to do anything for food because they've just had a full meal. So don't try and train when they're too hungry, and don't try and train when they are too full. Next, overexcited or overtired. If they are too overexcited, they are not going to be in a frame of mind where they're going to be able to focus on what you're doing, and they're not going to retain the information, and they're not going to learn. So you can't communicate with your puppy when it's too excited. Equally, you can't communicate with your puppy when it's too tired either. So you want to capture them in between those two times. When you are rewarding your puppy for the work that they have done for you, for listening, for following the cue, for making the shape, the behavior that you've asked them to do, and you are rewarding them, what are you going to reward them with? Now, when it comes to dogs, you always reward them with what they find most rewarding. So later in life, if you've got a spaniel or a collie maybe, and they are absolutely ball obsessed, and this could be any breed to be fair, you throw that ball for them and it's the best thing on this planet. That is the reward that you want to be using. That's the thing that's going to be an excellent reinforcer. But when you're working with an 8 to 12 week old puppy, where the world just hasn't been big enough to even include a ball yet, the only thing they really know in this world is food. So we're going to use food to help them learn and retain information, because that's what drives a puppy. So what food are we going to use? Because when you go into the pet shops, the shelves are stacked full with training treats of all sorts of shapes and sizes and flavors and all the rest of it. So which one are you going to pick? I'm going to tell you, none of them. Don't you dare spend a penny on any of those training treats. Not when you are very first training a puppy in your home and shaping them. You want something that you have got, and I haven't said this already, and I should have said this already, you've got a maximum of about 3 minutes of attention that your puppy is going to spend on you on any one thing. In those 3 minutes, you are going to want to repeat something about 20 times in order to establish the point that you got to before, progress it, and know where you've got to for the end, for when you're going to move on next time. You want to get as far as you can in your progression within those 3 minutes. You want to be repeating 20 times within those 3 minutes at least, in order to progress far enough for that session. So you want to be going go, 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 or good, 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 and giving them tiny weeny, and I'm talking tiny weeny little pieces of treat in order to keep it coming. You don't want the treats to be too big, because if they're too big, they're going to chew, and that's going to take the amount of time that it would have taken to repeat what you've just done with them another time. So not too big, keep it small. Not too dry. If it's too dry, what happens is you get maybe 5-10 repeats through it, more or less, and they're distracted by the fact that they're thirsty. So they're not going to focus on the training anymore, because they're thinking, where's the water? I need some water. Having had some water, then you're going to get back and think, come on, we've got to continue. And they're going to go, yeah, okay, for about another 10. And then they're going to go, hold on a second, I need a wee now. And they're going to be off again. Holding their focus when you're giving them something dry is very, very difficult. So you want small pieces of moist food, moist and tasty. Okay, so the most popular foods to use as training treats within a training session would be something like cooked chicken, cooked liver, cooked sausage. Some people have used some fish items as well, but most of the time those three would be top of my list. And then when you might want, for example, if you're giving them rewards every time they go out for a wee, you might want to have a little tub by your back door. And then because you can't keep fresh treats like chicken and sausage and liver in those tubs, and because you're only giving them one piece of something because they've just done something, then you can look at other treats that you could put in that tub. But when you're trying to repeat and get as far as you can within a training session of 3 minutes for any one thing, you want to keep it small and moist. So cooked chicken is probably the easiest and the most popular. Okay, so just to cover the essentials within this session, always remain consistent. Always set them up to succeed rather than fail. Pick your times, the most suitable times to do your training sessions. Teach them what the shape is before you add the cue. Once they understand the cue, then you can do the visual and verbal cue. Always mark. If you do not mark good on the split second that they do the behavior you want, they won't understand. They will learn that good means that the reward is coming. They will connect the word good to the reward. Later in life, when you've got an older dog, you will drop the reward and you will just have the word good to see them through the rest of their lives, unless, of course, you want to give them a reward at some point in time. Your reward. Make sure it's nice and tasty and that you can use it to repeat 20 times in the 3 minutes of focus of attention that you have with your puppy. Always end on a high. Always make sure if it's not going well, just move back a few steps to something that they can do and finish on a high. Always finish on a high. Don't just try and get a little bit further just because you have an aim in mind. Work with your puppy's abilities for that particular session. And keep those rewards nice and tasty, nice and juicy. Hopefully now with these tips, it gives you a good foundation of knowledge on how your dogs learn through learning what a cue is and then rewarding what you want repeated. Use positive reinforcement in order to teach your puppy new things. So hopefully now you've got a whole bunch of rules and tips to see you through your training course, and I wish you all the best with the rest that is to follow. Until next time, take care. Keep smiling.